Hello everyone, my name is Matt, and today I'm going to be going over the Blight Curse precon. I'm going to be honest with y'all, this is the very first time that I have ever made a Magic the Gathering video of any kind, so if it sucks, I apologize, but I've never done anything like this before. With all that being said, let's just jump into this and see how it goes. In this video I plan on going over the stats of the deck, the overall game plan, what I think it's going to be trying to do, cards that I think that I would cut, and suggestions for cards to add. By the end of this video, this will be an entirely different deck, and it will have an unlimited budget. I'm just going to go and do like the very top end of what I think this deck can accomplish. This is not a cut 10, add 10, spend $50 kind of video. There will be various budget levels for the upgrades themselves, so if there's something within your budget and you think that you would like it, feel free to go ahead and try it out, but I'm not trying to stay with any particular budget range. With that being said, that's my little disclaimer. I'm going to go ahead and start to pick out a few notable reprints that I've noticed within the deck. We'll start with Chimley, the Inner Sun. It is a 6-cost artifact, legendary artifact. Spells you control can't be countered. At the beginning of your end step, discover 5. To discover 5, you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value 5 or less. You can cast that card without paying its mana cost, or put it into your hand. And you put the other cards you revealed this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. The biggest and most expensive card that was reprinted for this deck is Necroskitter. It's 1 and 2 black for a 1/4 elemental creature with Wither. It deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. Whenever a creature an opponent controls with a -1/-1 counter on it dies, you may return that card to the battlefield under your control. Honestly, I did not think this would get reprinted considering how powerful it is. So I'm kind of surprised and, quite frankly, impressed that Wizards of the Coast went ahead and reprinted this. We'll start from the top. Archfiend Ifnir is a notable reprint, but not in terms of price, so I'll go over that later. Another one that was notable was Tree of Perdition, which is 3 and a black for a 0/13 defender. Tap it, exchange target opponent's life total with this creature's toughness. Let's make this easy on myself. And arrange them by price. Midnight Banshee is 3 and 3 black for a 5/5 spirit. It has a Wither. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a -1/-1 counter on each non-black creature. Massacre Girl Known Killer is another one that I didn't think they would put in the deck, but they did. 2 and 2 black for a 4/4 human assassin. Legendary creature. Has Menace. Creatures you control have Wither. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. Flourishing Defenses, once again, another card I didn't think they were going to include. It is 4 and 1 green for an enchantment. Whenever a -1/-1 counter is placed on a creature, you may put a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token onto the battlefield. Flowfly Infestation, tuna black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, if it had a -1/-1 counter on it, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Liliana, Death Wielder, is 5 and 2 black for a Planeswalker that has 5 loyalty. For +2 loyalty, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. At the cost of 3 loyalty, destroy a target creature with -1/-1 counter on it. And for 10 loyalty, return all creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield. Vraska, Betrayal Sting, 4 black and a black Phyrexian mana for a 6 loyalty legendary Planeswalker. For 0 loyalty, draw a card, lose 1 life, and proliferate. For 2 loyalty, target creature becomes an artifact, a treasure artifact. Everyone knows what a treasure is. And it loses all other creature types and abilities. For the cost of 9 loyalty, if target player has less than 9 poison counters, you put a number of poison counters equal to the difference on that player. So, and it takes 10 poison counters to kill someone. So you are basically putting them on death's door. One last notable reprint I'd like to go over is the Scorpion God. 3, a black and a red for a 6/5 god. Whenever a creature with a -1/-1 counter on it dies, draw a card. And then for 1 black and a red, put a -1/-1 counter on another target creature. When the Scorpion God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Now let's go over the rest of the deck. Let's go ahead and break it down into its stats. If I can get it to do what I told it to. And I can stop being blind. There we go. Alright, so there are 39 lands in the deck. There are 14 various ways to draw cards, 16 pieces of removal, 7 of recursion, 8 ramp, 4 things that can make tokens in some way, and 3 ways to proliferate, and now we'll go and just go over the deck card by card. Wickersmith's Tools is a 3-cost artifact. Whenever 1 or more -1/-1 counters are put on a creature, put a charge counter on this artifact. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, and you can pay 5, tap it, sacrifice this artifact, create X tapped 2/2 color Scarecrow artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of charge counters on this artifact. Commander Sphere is a pretty common staple in precons. It is a 3-cost artifact. Tap it to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Sack it, draw a card. Arcane Signet, another staple. 2 mana, tap it, add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Contagion Clasp, 2 for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. You can pay 4, tap Contagion Clasp, and proliferate. Soul Ring is probably the most iconic card in Commander, in my opinion. Everyone knows what this card does. It's a 1-cost artifact, tap it, add 2 mana of any color. Chimley, the Inner Sun, we went over earlier. 6 for a legendary artifact. Spells you control can't be countered. And at the beginning of your end step, discover 5. Dread Tiller, I believe, is a new card, but I'm not 100% sure on that. It is 1 black and a green for a 2/4 artifact creature Scarecrow. When this creature enters the battlefield, you put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Whenever a creature with a -1/-1 counter on it dies, you may put a land card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. So it is kind of a pseudo ramp, assuming that you have a land in your graveyard or in your hand. And you have a way of killing something with -1/-1 counters, which this deck does. I'm pretty sure this is also a new card. Fair4 Young You costs 6 and a green for a 4/7 legendary creature Tree Folk Druid. When Fair4 enters, create a number of 1/1 green sapling creature tokens equal to the number of counters among creatures target player controls. You can also tap Fair4 to double the number of each kind of counter on target creature. Oft-nabbed goat. It is 1 and a black for a 0/5 goat. Pay 1 mana, draw a card, gain control of this creature, and put a -1/-1 counter on it. Only your opponents may activate this ability and only as a sorcery. When this creature dies, if it had 1 or more 1/1 counters on it, -1/-1 counters on it, its owner draws that many cards and each other player loses that many life. So your opponents pay 1, they draw a card and put a -1/-1 counter on it. So since they control it, when the -1/-1 counter goes on it, if your commander is out, they'll lose a life and draw a card. And this process will happen 5 times, assuming no one removes it before it reaches the 5th -1/-1 counter. But then each of your opponents will lose 5 life and you'll draw 5 cards. So I just feel like your opponents, if they're smart, they'll get it to like 4 -1/-1 counters and then kill it and you don't get any payoff. So this is probably one of the cards I would probably end up cutting, to be honest. Because it sounds good on paper, but in reality, you're not reaching that 5 counter. Unless you put them on there yourself, which you can do. But I would rather, like I said, I feel like this is going to just get removed like really quickly after 3 or 4 counters. Sinister Gnarlbark, 2 and a black for a Treefolk Warlock that with 0/4 body. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card and blight 1. To blight 1, you put a -1/-1 counter on a creature you control. So this, I actually really like this card because it comes in, you put a -1/-1 counter on something. Assuming your commander is out, you draw a card, and then you draw a card from this effect as well. So it's 3 mana for a 0/4, draw 2 cards, and then draw a card, draw 2 cards every end step after that. I mean, it comes in, yeah, move to the end step, draw a card from Monty Ul from the Blight effect, and then draw another card. This is pretty decent for 3 mana. The Reaper, King No More. This is the backup commander of the deck. He costs either 6 generic mana or Jund, or some combination of those mana values. He is a 3/3 legendary artifact creature scarecrow. When the Reaper enters, put a -1/-1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So that's either drawing 2 cards or draining your opponents for 2 life, or a combination of those things. Whenever a creature an opponent control with a -1/-1 counter on it dies, you may put that card onto the battlefield under your control. Do this only once each turn. So this is a much more fair version of Necroskitter, which I went over earlier. Still getting a creature of your choice once every turn is very good. I think he will definitely be staying in the 99. He would probably, I would say he would be fun to play around, but I feel like the do this once only each turn makes him almost too fair to be a commander. Village Pillagers, 3 and 2 red for a 5/5 Goblin Warrior. It has Wither, and Wither basically means that when he deals combat damage to creatures, he deals that damage in the form of -1/-1 counters. When this creature enters, it deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control. So kind of pseudo board wipe, getting a lot of value out of your opponents if they play a lot of little guys or they have a lot of 1/1 tokens or whatever. Whenever a creature an opponent controls with a counter on it dies, notably it does not have to be a -1/-1 counter, it can be any kind of counter, you create a tapped treasure token. So this is a bit of ramp, or pseudo ramp. This is one of the maybe cards. Like, I would try this out to see how it performs. The fact that it has Wither is quite nice, but it is 5 mana, and you do have to have your opponent's creatures have tokens on counters on them before it really lives up to its potential, and that's not always going to be the case. So I would play 2-3 games with this card, see how I felt about it, and potentially cut it if necessary. Next up, we've got Skin Render, 2 and 2 black for a 3/3 zombie. When Skin Render enters the battlefield, put 3 -1/-1 counters on target creature. Wicker Bow Elder, 3 and a green, 4/4 Tree Folk Shaman. Wicker Bow Elder enters the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. Pay 1 green, remove a -1/-1 counter from Wicker Bow Elder. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Channeler Initiate for a 1 green for a human druid with a 3/4 body. When Channeler Initiate enters the battlefield, put 3 -1/-1 counters on a target creature. Tap Channeler Initiate, remove a -1/-1 counter from it, and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Puppeteer Click, 3 and 2 black for a 3/2 Fairy Wizard with flying. When Puppeteer Click enters the battlefield, put target creature from an opponent's graveyard into the battlefield under your control. It gains haste at the beginning of your next end step. Sacrifice it. It has Persist. When this creature dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. Soul Snuffers, 2 and 2 black for a 3/3 Elemental Shaman. When Soul Snuffers enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature. Hepatra Vizier poisons a green and a black, or black and green if I could actually look at the card correctly. For a 2/2 legendary creature human cleric, when Hepatra Vizier poisons deals combat damage to a player, you may put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. When you put one or more -1/-1 counters on a target creature, or on a creature, create a 1/1 green snake creature token with Death Touch. Devoted Druid, 1 and a green for a 0/2 elf druid. Tap it to add a green mana. Put a -1/-1 counter on Devoted Druid, untap Devoted Druid. Grave Titan, 4 and 2 black for a 6/6 giant. It has Death Touch. Whenever Grave Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, create 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. Kolrath Knight, 3 hybrid red and 3 and 2 hybrid black and red mana for a 3/3 elemental knight with flying. It has a wither. I've already gone over what wither is. I don't really think I need to go over it again. Creatures your opponents control with counters on them can attack or block. Carnifex Demon, 4 and 2 black for a 6/6 demon with flying. Carnifex Demon enters the battlefield with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. You can pay 1 black mana, remove a -1/-1 counter from Carnifex Demon, put a -1/-1 counter on each other creature. Ignoble Hierarch, 1 green for a 0/1 Goblin Shaman. It has Exalted. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, that creature gains +1/+1 until the end of the turn. And you can tap him to add a black, red, or green mana. Grim Poppet, 7 for a 4/4 artifact creature scarecrow. Grim Poppet enters the battlefield with 3 -1/-1 counters on it. Remove a -1/-1 counter from Grim Poppet. Put a -1/-1 counter on another target creature. Glissa Sunslayer, 1 a black and a green for a 3/3 legendary Phyrexian zombie elf. First strike, Death Touch. When Glissa Sunslayer deals combat damage to a player, choose 1. You draw a card and lose a life. Destroy target enchantment, or remove up to 3 counters from target permanent. Dusk Urchin, 2 and a black for a 4/3 Oofy. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly. Probably not, but we're going to go with the Oofy. Whenever Dusk Urchins attacks or blocks, put a -1/-1 counter on it. When Dusk Urchin is put into the graveyard from play, we'll say the battlefield, draw a card for each -1/-1 counter on it. Evolution Sage, 2 and a green, 3/2 elf druid. Whenever land enters the battlefield, proliferate. So basically, you just get to add counters to things whenever you play a land. Archfiend of Ifnir, 3 and 2 swamps, 3 and 2 black, 5/4 demon with flying. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control. And it has cycling 2. Cycling is you pay 2 and then you do whatever the effect is. So in this case, it's you pay 2, discard this card, draw a card. The Scorpion God, 3 a black and a red for a 6/5 a legendary creature god. Whenever a creature with a -1/-1 counter on it dies, draw a card. For 1 black and a red, put a -1/-1 counter on another target creature. And when the Scorpion King dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Massacre Girl, Gnome Killer. 2 black for a 4/4 legendary human assassin. She has Menace. Creatures with Menace can only be blocked by 2 or more creatures, I believe. Creatures you control have Wither. Whenever a creature an opponent control dies, if its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. Midnight Banshee 3 and 3 black mana for a 5/5 spirit with Wither. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a -1/-1 counter on each non-black creature. Tree of Perdition, I remember going over, but I'll do it again. It is 3 and a black mana for a 0/13 plant with Defender, and you can tap it to exchange opponent's life total with this creature's toughness. And then Necroskitter, once again we went over. But it's 1 black for a 1/4 elemental with Wither, and whenever a creature an opponent controls with a -1/-1 counter on it dies, you may return that card to the battlefield under your control. Enchantments. 3 and a black for Grave Venerations. Whenever this enchantment enters, you become the monarch. At the beginning of your end step, if you're the monarch, return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Lasting Tarfire. 1 and a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of each end step, if you put a counter on a creature this turn, this enchantment deals 2 damage to each opponent. Puka's Covenant. 2 and a green. Whenever a creature you control with a counter on it dies, you may return another target permanent card with a mana value less than or equal to the number of counters on that creature from your graveyard to your hand. Do this only once each turn. Binding the Old Gods. 2 and a black for an enchantment saga. Chapter 1. Destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls. Chapter 2. Search your library for a forest card. Put it onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. And Chapter 3. Creatures you control gain Death Touch until the end of the turn. Everlasting Torment. 2 and a hybrid black or red mana. Enchantment. Players can't gain life. Damage can't be prevented. All damage is dealt as though its source had Wither. Blowfly Infestation. I remember going over this, but I'll do it again. 2 and a black. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, if it had a -1/-1 counter on it, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Flourishing Defenses. 4 and a green enchantment. Whenever a -1/-1 counter is placed on a creature, you may put a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token into play. Instances. Fire Covenant. 1 black and red. As an additional cost to cast a spell, pay X life. Fire Covenant deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. Putrefy. 1 black and green. Destroy target artifact or creature, it can't be regenerated. Infernal Grasp is 1 and a black. Destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. Cathartic Pyre. Instant, choose 1. Cathartic Pyre deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Destroy up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. Terminate. Black and a red. Destroy target creature, it can't be regenerated. Assassin's Trophy. Black and a green. Destroy target permanent and opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land, put it into the battlefield, and then shuffle. Lands, I will do the last. I'll just go over what to cut and what I would put in instead. There are two planeswalkers in the deck. The first one is Vraska, Betrayal Sting. And I'm going to view the card details so I can actually read what her different modes are, because for some reason I just have trouble reading it in the normal viewer. Anyway, Vraska, Betrayal Sting, 4 a black and a Phyrexian black mana. For 0 loyalty, well, she starts with 6 loyalty. For 0 loyalty, draw a card, lose 1 life, and proliferate. For the cost of 2 loyalty, target creature becomes a treasure token, or treasure artifact. You tap it, sacrifice it, add 1 mana of any color, and it loses all the card types and abilities. At the cost of 9 loyalty, if target player has fewer than 9 poison counters, they get a number of poison counters equal to the difference. Liliana Deathwielder, 5 black. She comes in with 5 loyalty. Plus 2 loyalty, put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature. -3 loyalty, destroy target creature with a -1/-1 counter on it. And at 10 loyalty, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. There are 12 sorcery cards. Aberrant Return, 4 black. Put 1, 2, or 3 target creature cards from graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Each of them enter with an additional -1/-1 counter on it. Burning Curiosity, 2 and a red. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you may blight 1. And once again, to blight 1, you choose a creature you control and put a -1/-1 counter on it. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. If this spell's additional cost was paid, exile the top 3 cards instead. Until the end of your turn, you may play those cards. Eventide's Shadow, 4 and a black. Remove any number of counters from among permanents on the battlefield. You draw cards and lose life equal to the number of counters removed this way. Cathartic Reunion, 1 and a red. Is an additional cost to cast a spell. Discard 2 cards. Draw 3 cards. Harmonize, 2 green, draw 3 cards. Chain Reaction, 2 red. Chain Reaction deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. Chain Reaction, 2 and 2 red. Chain Reaction deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. Incremental Blight, 3 and 2 black. Put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, 2 -1/-1 counters on another target creature, and 3 -1/-1 counters on a third target creature. Hoarder's Greed, 3 and a black. You lose 2 life and draw 2 cards, then clash with an opponent. If you win, repeat this process. Each clashing player reveals the top card of his or her library, then puts that card on the top or bottom. A player wins if his or her card has a higher converted mana cost. Painful Truths, 2 and a black. Converge. You draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of colors of mana spent to cast the spell. Black Sun's Zenith, X black. Put X -1/-1 counters on each creature. Shuffle Black Sun's Zenith into its owner's library. Knight's Whisper, 1 and a black, you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Persist, 1 and a black, return target non-legendary creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. Okay, so that completes the deck list. Overall, right out of the box, I think that it looks fairly strong. I do see a few cards that I would cut that I don't think that really align with the strategy that this deck is going for. As I decide to cut or keep cards, I'll justify my reasoning. I'm going to start off with 2 very easy cuts, and that's both Planeswalkers. The reason why I am going to cut them is because unless you're doing a Super Friends strategy where you've got a lot of Planeswalkers and you're proliferating a bunch to get to the ults quickly and stuff like that, from what I've seen and heard, Planeswalkers don't do well in Commander. And for that reason alone, I'm going to cut both of them. Anything that I put into the sideboard is going to be cut. Now let's go through the list. Wickersmith's Tools. I understand why it's here. In theory, this is a neat card. You know, you put it out on turn 3. It's a mana rock, and you always want more mana rocks, but it costs 3 mana. You have to charge it up by putting -1/-1 counters on things. And then you have to pay another 5 mana to sacrifice it to get to the payoff. If you are in a pod that's playing unupgraded precons, or maybe even bracket 3, this might be okay. But especially bracket 2, I think this would be fine. But if you go into the higher brackets, it's just not good enough. And for that reason, I'm going to cut it. I understand on paper this is interesting, and it is. I just feel like I said, at higher power levels, this is too slow to be effective. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to just go ahead and cut it. Another one that I'm going to cut is Chmeal. I think I called it Chimley earlier. I don't think that's correct. I think it's more like Chmeal. Anyway, spells you control can't be countered is nice, and Discover is also nice, but it doesn't really do anything to push the strategy of the deck forward. It's not putting counters on anything. It's not drawing cards. It's not making tokens. I just don't see why this was included. It's a great card. I would put it in a different deck. I wouldn't put it in this one. Commander's Sphere is the same as Wickersmith's Tools. I think there are better mana rocks and other ways to ramp. So I'm going to cut it. Dread Tiller. This is one that's giving me pause. This is like a maybe card. I would try this card out for a few games to see how it performed, because there are other cards that I would put in its place. But I would want to try it out a few times to see if maybe it changed my mind. This isn't a straight cut. This is more like a question mark. Farrah 4, on the other hand, I do like the idea of making all these tokens based on the number of counters that are on a creature. a target player controls. It's not a creature, it's all creatures target player controls. So potentially this could be a way to pump out a lot of tokens, and it lets you double the number of counters on a target creature. But it's 7 mana, and I cannot justify spending 7 mana on this card. I feel like if you're spending 7 mana, you need something that's going to immediately win you the game. And depending on the number of counters that you are going to be producing from this deck, maybe it could. But I have another card in mind to generate counters, and this is just not it. Plus, like I said, it's 7 mana. That's a lot. Oft-nabbed Goat. I like this card. I think that it's a funny card, and I might play a few games with it just to dick around, basically. But I feel like this is, like I said, this is a removal bait. This is your opponents are getting free cards, and then they're going to kill it before you get the payoff. So for that reason, if I was building this deck to be serious and as competitive as I could make it, I would cut this card. Sinister Gnarlbark I spoke about earlier. I love this card. I think that it's fantastic. At your end step, you're going to get a card from this effect, and you're going to blight one, probably on your own creature, to draw another card. So I feel like getting 2 cards at every end step, it's going to raise eyebrows eventually, but you might slide under the radar for a little bit. I will keep this in the deck to see how it performs, and if it sucks more than I think it does, I will cut it. Reaper King No More. Potentially just 3 mana to put a 1/1 counter onto 2 creatures, which should draw you 2 cards or drain 2 life from opponents. And then you get to get a creature back with his ability once per turn. This is, like I said, it is a slightly worse version of Necroskitter. But even a slightly worse version of Necroskitter is quite good. So you're safe. You're not going anywhere. Village Pillagers. So when I really start looking at cards, on average, the decks that I make, I try and keep them around the 2 to 2.5 average mana value range. So 5 mana or more is when I start really thinking hard about, is this a card that I want to keep, or is it something that needs to go? And it is right on the cusp of, do I want to keep this or not? Because it has Wither, which you obviously want in this deck because you want to put -1/-1 counters on things. The 1 damage to each creature your opponent controls could be nice, especially if it kills something that already has a -1/-1 counter on it, and you've got your Flowfly Infestation out, so you can put more counters on things to drain more life or draw more cards. And whenever a creature an opponent controls with a counter on it dies, you get to create a treasure token. So it's, like I said before, it may not have been in relation to this card, but this says a counter. It's not just -1/-1 counters. So you could be making a lot of treasure tokens. But that 5 mana cost is what's making me think, is this good enough? This is good enough to make me want to play a few games with it to see if I like it and see how it performs. So this is a maybe card. It may end up being cut. Maybe it won't. Skin Render, 4 mana to put 3 1/1 counters on a target creature. This sounds good in theory, and I've noticed on EDH Rec that a lot of people, well, there are not a lot of decks, there's maybe 100, but this seems to be a relatively highly included card. But I honestly don't think it's as good as people are giving it credit for. Yeah, you're putting 3/1 -1/-1 counters on a creature, but it's only drawing you one card or costing your opponent 1 life. Now, if that creature dies and you've got your Blowfly Infestation out, you can redistribute those 1 counters. Let me read this. If it had a 1/1 counter on it, put a 1/1 counter on a target creature. So if you have more than 1/1 counter on it, do you get to put all, say, there are 3 -1/-1 counters on a creature when it dies. Do you get to put all 3 of them back, or is it just 1/1 counter? I would have to look up the rules for that. I'm honestly not sure. If there are any rulings here. Okay. So this ability is mandatory, so you have to put a counter on one of your creature if you're the only one of creatures, and it doesn't matter how many -1/-1 counters there are, you only get 1. So that kind of diminishes how good I thought this was, but it is still quite good. So I kind of feel like I might actually cut that. I don't think it's that good. It's a 3/3 body for 4 mana. You're draining a life and potentially putting a -1 counter on another creature once the original creature dies. I have other creatures in mind for this deck, so I'm going to say that you get cut. Puppeteer, click, flying, return a creature from an opponent's graveyard, exile it, persist. Again, persist is like the only thing I care about on this card. I don't really care that it brings something back. It's not something of yours, so there's no guarantee it'll be something of value. I think this is one that I would also probably get rid of. It's expensive. Yes, it has flying. Yes, it has persist. But this card does not impress me very much. Soul Snuffers. This is one that I was considering putting in the deck that I theory crafted before the deck list was released, and I ended up putting some slightly different cards in there. This is one of the cards that I could see myself keeping, so I would put this in the maybe category. It's obviously a desirable effect. It costs a little more than I would like for it to, but I would try this a few times and potentially keep it. Grave Titan. Now this is another one of the cards, along with Chameel, that I saw on the deck list, and it kind of boggled my mind. I'm really not sure why this card is in the deck, other than it makes tokens. So maybe the token strategy is sometimes you want to draw cards with your commander, but there are creatures that you don't want to put -1/-1 counters on. So you put them on a token and draw cards that way, so you don't have to sacrifice the more important pieces of your game plan. But even if that is the thought process behind including this card, there are other cards that make tokens that make more sense that I'll be adding to the list. So this is just an easy cut, because other than the fact that it makes tokens, I don't know why it's here. It doesn't do anything to synergize with your game plan at all. And it's the most easy cut of this entire deck. Grim Poppet. 7 mana. I just immediately want to cut it on that point alone. I think this synergizes with the deck a lot more than the Grave Titan, I'll say that. The fact that it comes in with 3/1/1 counters on it means that you get to draw a card when it enters the battlefield, assuming your commander is on the battlefield. And the fact that you don't have to tap it to remove the -1/-1 counters that it enters with means that in theory, you can pay 7 mana, get a 4/4 body, and draw 4 cards. Or you can distribute those -1/-1 counters amongst creatures your opponents control to drain them of life, or some combination of these options. I get why it's there. It obviously synergizes with the deck, but I don't want to spend 7 mana unless I'm going to do something that's going to win me the game pretty much immediately. So for that reason, I will cut this. I do believe that there are other options that I'll be including that are just as good, if not better, for less mana. And for that reason, I can see myself cutting this. Glissa Sunslayer. I do like this card. I like that it adds first strike and death touch. I like that it allows you to remove counters from a target permanent. So you can not only remove 1/1 counters from yourself, but remove +1/+1 counters from an opponent's creatures, or loyalty counters from an opponent's planeswalker. But I'm not really sold on this card. It has obvious upsides. This is one of the ones that I would have to play a few games with and see what I thought about it. I'm not saying that I would cut it for sure, but I'm not sold on it either. No, that's the right spot. So once again, this is one of the cards that has obvious synergy. It lets you draw cards when it attacks or blocks, and then when it dies, you draw cards for each -1/-1 counter on it. So that would be what you attack with it or block with it a total of 3 times. So you get 3 cards. It dies, you get 3 more cards. This is a strong card that I'm like 90% sure I would keep this, but I do have some other creatures I would want to try out in the deck. So this is one of the ones I would switch out for a little while, or try out for a little while, switch it out, and then like compare how I felt about it. I would probably end up leaning towards keeping it, but I'm not 100% sure about this card, because I have, like I said, I have some other options I would want to try out. Evolution Sage, this is, in my opinion, a no-brainer include. I was going to buy this card if it wasn't in the deck already. It is being able to proliferate at least once per turn just by playing a land, which is something you're going to do anyway, is incredibly strong with the -1/-1 strategy. So it is definitely staying in the deck. Archfiend of Ifnir is another card I was going to buy if it wasn't in the deck. The Flying Evasion is nice, but the cycling or discarding to put -1/-1 counters on your opponent's creatures is the real sell for this card, especially if you have your commander out. Let's say you have this out, you're able to discard a card every turn, and maybe if you even have Evolution Sage out, then you get to proliferate every turn. So, this is another card. Like I said, I was going to buy it if it wasn't in the deck, and I'm glad that it is. I do feel like this deck, if you really want to take advantage of this, you would have to beef up the discard/cycle strategy a little bit more, which is something I'm planning on doing with some of the cards that I'm going to add. The Scorpion God is another creature I was going to buy if it was not in the deck. Whenever a creature with a -1/-1 counter it dies, you get to draw a card. And it's not just your opponent's creatures, it's any creature. And you can also put a -1/-1 counter on it on creatures with its ability. So this is another auto include in the deck. I'm not going to be cutting it. It is definitely going to stay. Massacre Girl Known Killer. Once again, this is another card I was going to buy if it wasn't in the deck. The Menace is strong, but it doesn't really matter because I probably would never attack with this, because the real meat and potatoes of this deck is the last. This card is the last two lines or paragraphs, giving all of your creatures wither and being able to draw cards when an opponent's creature dies if its toughness was less than 1. So this should, in theory, end up drawing you a lot of cards. And then, since it's giving everything wither, it'll trigger your opponent, your commander, to drain your opponent's life. So this is another auto include. 10 out of 10, no notes. Midnight Banshee is a card that I took a long, hard look at, since it has wither and it lets you put -1/-1 counters on things. The only thing that's really holding this card back is its mana value. Needing 3 black pips to cast it is kind of a lot. Maybe not in more casual Commander where you have longer games and thus you have more chance of building up your mana base or drawing something like a Dark Ritual or some more mana rocks that can produce colored mana. But in a more fast-paced environment, 6 mana, especially, like I said, 3 pips is all 1 color. That's kind of a lot to ask. This is a card I had on my watch list. I ended up not using it in the deck that I theory crafted, but I would probably try it since it's in the precon. But it was not a card I was going to end up buying if it wasn't already in the deck list. So I will try this. I will put it in the maybe category. I will probably end up cutting it if I'm being honest, but maybe it performs better. Maybe it's easier to get onto the battlefield than I think it is. So for that reason, I will just try it out and see what happens. Tree of Perdition. I get why this is here. It is easier to drain someone from 13 life than 40. So the logic of why this is in the deck makes sense. But this card in and of itself does not further your game plan. You could say that it enables it, or that it makes it easier to execute. But I just feel like there are other cards I would rather have in the deck, and as such, it will go into the sideboard. Necro Skitter, whatever. I'm not even gonna lie. I've already ordered this card. It came in the mail. I bought it under the assumption that it was not going to get reprinted because it was too powerful. I'm obviously going to put it in the deck. And yeah, it's. I am shocked that it's there. They put way better cards into this deck than I was expecting. So it's staying in the deck. Grave Venerations. When this enters, you become the Monarch. Being the Monarch, obviously you're just painting a big target on your back, and I feel like this deck is gonna do that anyway. However, the effect of putting a creature from the graveyard into your hand is too good to pass up. The potential of doing this every turn is just, it's too tempting. I'm going to keep this in the deck. And yeah, if it ends up being too much of a hassle, if I lose the Monarch and I just can't get it back and it happens repeatedly, I'll think about cutting it, but for now it's staying. Lasting Tarfire is a worse version of a card I'm going to be putting into the deck. Yes, you can trigger it every turn cycle, but I'm planning on putting in All Will Be One, which is a more expensive, both in terms of actual real world cost, but mana value wise, it's a more expensive version of this card, and it's one that I will be showing off here shortly. This is not a bad card if you don't want to spend the mana for All Will Be One. This is worth keeping in the deck. I'm just replacing it with something that I perceive to be better, and that's the only reason why I'm cutting it. Puka's Covenant. I have to read this because I don't remember what it does anymore. Whenever a creature you control with a counter on it dies, return another target permanent card with mana value less than or equal to. Okay, yeah, I remember what this one does now. You get to return a creature from your graveyard to your hand once per turn. This is a nice little bit of recursion. The restrictions of having it be the card be equal to the number of counters and doing it once per turn are the things that really kill this for me. This is a card I would try, but it's one that I expected I would cut simply because of the restrictions on the card. So I'll try it, see how it does. Maybe I'll like it more than I think I will, and it'll end up staying. But for right now, it's going into the maybe category, even though I kind of want to cut it outright. Binding the Old Gods. I do not think that this card does much for this deck in terms of synergizing with the overall game plan. It's nice being able to destroy something and get a forest card, and even giving your creatures death touch. But if you are able to put -1/-1 counters on things, and you have your Knight out, then your opponent's creatures can't block anyway. So death touch is kind of irrelevant. Overall, I feel like this is a card that can easily be cut from the deck, and you won't really miss it. Everlasting Torment. This is another card I was going to buy if it wasn't in the deck. Players can't gain life and damage can't be prevented. It's all well and good. But the real crux of this, the real reason why we want this is to give all of our creatures wither, or it's all damage, but mostly all of our creatures. So we can put 1/1 counters on our opponent's creatures and drain them of life, which that can't be prevented. Is there a way to prevent life being drained? I know obviously there are fog effects and things like that to prevent combat damage. And there are probably ways to prevent yourself from taking damage. Like there are ways to give yourself hexproof and stuff like that, so you can't be the target of damaging abilities. If you have hexproof but damage can't be prevented, does that mean that you would no longer have hexproof? These are some rule questions that are just popping into my mind. But overall, this is a card that I was going to put in the deck anyway. It's definitely staying. The same is true with Blowfly Infestation. I would have bought this card if it wasn't already in the deck. Being able to basically recycle your -1/-1 counters, even if it's just one of them, that's pretty powerful. And since it goes on a target creature, let's say your opponent's creature has -1/-1 counters on it and it dies. You can put that -1/-1 counter that you're getting back on your own creature to draw a card if they don't have a creature to put a counter on. So this is staying. The same is true with Flourishing Defenses. This is another card that I actually bought because I didn't think it would be in the precon. This synergizes well with a card that we're going to be putting into the deck. And whenever you put a -1/-1 counter on something, you're getting a token out of it. And in theory, you should be making a lot of tokens with this card. Fire Covenant. I am of two minds about this card. The fact that I have to pay X life and then that damage is divided among any number of creatures. I wish it was more like you pay X life and it deals X damage to any number of target creatures. But it is an instant speed spell and kind of a pseudo board wipe, or at the very least, you can ping down a few small creatures at instant speed, or something of that effect. So part of me wants to keep it for the utility. Part of me thinks there are better removal spells out there that don't require you to sack your life. Or if you do, it'll do damage to all creatures, like a Toxic Deluge. I would try this out, see how the utility is, and if I'm not satisfied, I would cut it. Putrefy is okay. There's other removal I would rather use. But it does target more than just a creature, or creatures. You can also get an artifact with it. Um, this is probably worth keeping. I'm probably just being uh, too much of a hard ass. I'll put it in the maybe. Um, I'll recommend some other removal, and if that's out of your budget, just keep this. Infernal Grasp, great card. 2 mana, destroy a target creature, lose 2 life. Yeah, uh, this is definitely worth keeping. Cathartic Pyre, 2 mana to either deal 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker, or discard 2 cards and draw that many cards. So that would be 2 instances of triggers for Archfiend of Ifnir and draw 3 cards. I think this is another one that I would keep, try out, see how it performs. For it to do the maximum potential that it can, I'd have to have either a very dangerous creature or planeswalker with 3 power or loyalty or less, or have Archfiend on the battlefield, and preferably my commander as well. Once again, worth trying out to see how it does. Not sold on it, but I don't hate it. Terminate. Destroy target creature can't be regenerated. I would destroy that or cut that. I'd like to get some removal that has exile. Assassin's Trophy. I will keep this because it's any target permanent. It's very good. Lands, I'll probably go over last. Four mana for up to 3 target creatures. They come in with -1/-1 counters on them. Maybe. It is obviously powerful. 5 mana is still a lot. Every time I see that 5 mana symbol, I have to really sit there and think, like, is it worth it? This seems like it would be worth it. I would definitely try this to see how it goes. Burning Curiosity, Blight 1 to exile 3 cards and play them until the end of the turn. Pretty good. This is another one of those maybe cards. I do think that I could find some better card draw because I want some card draw that I can reliably use every turn. And there are better card draw options out there. Plus, you can only do it at sorcery speed. Maybe leaning towards cutting. Eventide Shadow. Remove any number of counters from among permanents on the battlefield. Does that mean that I can choose to... All right. Let's say my opponent has... No, let's say I have 5 counters on a creature, 5/-1 counters, but I don't want to take 5 damage. Can I just remove, say, 3? Since it says any number. I don't see why I couldn't. I'm assuming that I could. I always feel hypocritical removing or thinking about cutting Burning Curiosity and saying that I would keep that. But honestly, I would. The reason is that instead of having 3 cards to choose from, I could potentially have as many as I want for 5 mana. I will keep Cathartic Reunion because it allows me to discard cards, which synergizes with the Archfiend. Harmonize, I will cut. I don't know why, but I've always thought that 4 mana for 3 cards without doing anything else. Like I said, I think there are better options. And I will find those options. Shit. Chain Reaction is okay. It deals X damage where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. I would almost rather have Toxic Deluge or Blasphemous Act. They're both cheaper and essentially serve the same purpose. And when I say cheaper, I mean in terms of mana value. So I would probably cut that and then put something else in, like a Blast Act or a Toxic Deluge. Toxic Deluge specifically because it can synergize with Massacre Girl to bring a bunch of creatures below 0 toughness. So we can cut that and put in a different board wipe. Incremental Blight is another card that I was looking at adding to my theory crafted deck. I ended up not keeping it because we'll get into that. It lets you put a total of 6 -1/-1 counters on 3 different creatures, which can either draw you up to 3 cards or drain up to 3 life. For 5 mana, plus if it dies, the creatures die, and you have your Blowfly Infestation on the battlefield, you can put those -1/-1 counters somewhere else, potentially draining even more life or drawing you even more cards. This is not a bad card, and it is playable, and I would put this in the maybe category. Keep this if what I'm suggesting to upgrade the deck with is out of your price range, or if you just don't see anything that you would want to put into the deck in this plate. So we'll put this in the maybe. Next up, Hoarder's Greed. Lose 2 life, draw 2, potentially repeat the process. In a lower power table, I would probably keep this because I feel like this card could add a lot of entertainment value, but in a more competitive setting, I just don't think that this is something that is going to I don't know, swing the game in my favor or help me close out the game. Plus, in theory, if I win repeatedly, then I'm just draining myself for more and more life. This is one of the cards that, if you're playing at a lower power level, I would keep it in the deck. But if not, I would probably just cut it. And for me, I will cut it. Painful Truths, pay 3, potentially draw 3, and lose 3 life. This is one of those, it's okay, it's good enough for, say, a bracket 2 or 3. Once you go beyond that, I just kind of feel like, once again, there are just better options. So I'm going to cut this simply because I personally would put something better in its place. If you're playing at a lower budget or a lower power level, feel free to keep it. Black Sun's Zenith is a wonderful card. I have a copy of it that I was going to put in the deck if it wasn't already in there, but looks like you don't need to worry about doing that. This is obviously staying, and I feel like it's going to do a lot of work because it can either potentially draw you a bunch of cards, drain your opponents of a bunch of life, or both. Night's Whisper, 2 mana, draw 2, lose 2. This is fine for 2 mana. I'll definitely keep this. Persist is another card I was going to buy if it wasn't in the deck. Return a card, non-legendary creature from your graveyard to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. So you get some recursion and you get to draw a card, assuming your commander is on the battlefield. So these are all the cards that I would keep in the deck, not including the lands. I'm debating whether I should go over the lands in the video or not. I'm sure this is already a long video. Most people aren't going to watch something this long. But at the very end, after I've made my recommendations for what cards to put in, I can probably go through here and cut a few and add a few to make it a little bit better. First things first, there's a card that I bought today, and I'm glad that I did because it's not in the deck, called Cauldron of Souls. It's a 5-cost artifact. Tap it, choose any number of creatures. Each of those creatures gain persist until the end of the turn. This is great board wipe protection, plus all the creatures that come back with persist that have -1/-1 counters on them. If your commander is on the battlefield, you'll be drawing cards for each of those creatures. Nest of Scarabs. 2 and a black for an enchantment. Whenever you put a -1/-1 counter on a target creature, create that many 1/1 black insect creature tokens. High Perfect Morcant is not released yet. It is a new card coming in the set. There we go. Whenever High Perfect Morcant or another another elf you control enters, each opponent blights 1. So they put a -1/-1 counter on a creature they control. Tap 3 untapped artifacts. Why do I keep saying artifacts? It is past midnight, 1:30 in the morning here, and I'm getting tired. So I apologize for saying artifacts. Tap 3 untapped elves you control, proliferate. So this card is a pseudo-infinite, 1/2 a pseudo-infinite combo with flourishing defenses. You have flourishing defenses on the battlefield. You play High Perfect Morcant. Each of your opponents blights 1, so they're going to put 1/1 counters on a creature they control. You'll make 3 elves that'll trigger High Perfect Morcant to make your opponents blight 3 more times. And then this loop keeps on going until all their creatures are dead. So in theory, you'll have as many elf tokens on the battlefield as your opponents have total toughness in their creatures. And whenever you blight one from it's whenever you put one or more on a creature. High Perfect Morgant will not trigger Nest of Scarabs, but still, it is a card worth having because you'll be putting a lot of -1/-1 counters on things. And since you're going to be having all these 1/1s floating around, you should probably do something with them. Like Skull Clamp. Just about everyone knows what Skull Clamp is. 1 mana for an artifact. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. When a equipped creature dies, you draw 2 cards and you equip it for 1. So this will help you burn through some of those 1/1s. I firmly believe that all decks should have some kind of my door just opened for no reason. So I guess my room is haunted or my cat was trying to get in. Whichever one of those, it makes more sense. Anyway, strong win conditions. If we're going to be creating a lot of tokens in this deck, we probably would want some way of sacrificing them. And I should probably spell. Alright, so Ashnod's Altar, 3 mana, artifact, sack a creature, add 2 colorless. Torment of Hellfire, X and 2 black. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. So, the way I see it, with what I want to do with this deck, I want to make a lot of 1/1 counters or 1/1 tokens. I want to sacrifice them to Ashnod's Altar to make a bunch of mana, and then cast Torment of Hellfire and close out the game. I also would want some more removal. Let's actually break this up into categories. Let's see. Yeah, we definitely want more removal. One of the things we would want to put in is a Deadly Relic. Having a free just exile something, obviously it's quite good. We do have a few ways to recur things, like Grave Venerations. So putting an Entomb in the deck and maybe a Reanimate to add in a little bit more recursion. Seems like it makes sense. I am going to go ahead and suggest 1 land. Arcane Lighthouse. Tap it to add a colorless, or more importantly, and pay 1, tap it until the end of the turn. Creatures your opponents control lose Hexproof and Shroud and can't gain Hexproof or Shroud. Since you are going to be putting things on target creatures, Shroud and Hexproof, blocking your ability to do that would be a major weakness of this deck. And having something to get around that, I think, would be quite good. And one of the things that I would get rid of is probably I do hate tap lands, and eventually I'm going to go over all the lands, but we'll just get rid of a tap land to substitute out for the Arcane Lighthouse. I'll go over the whole mana base later. Another card I would recommend is Maha, Its Feathers Knight, which says it's a 3 and a 2 black for a 6/5 flying trample. Ward, discard a card. Creatures your opponents control have base toughness 1. This is going to make it so much easier for you to kill things with -1/-1 counters. I bought one in anticipation for this deck. I was unsure of whether it was going to be reprinted or not, and I'm glad that I bought it now, since that I now know that it's not in the deck. This card is a little bit on the pricier side, but Spitting Dilophosaurus. I bought this one as well because I knew that it wasn't going to be reprinted because it's Universes Beyond. But it is 2 for a 3/2 dinosaur. When Spitting Dilophosaurus enters the battlefield or attacks, put a -1/-1 counter on the up to 1 target creature. Creatures your opponents control with -1/-1 counters on them can't block. So this is kind of like a cheaper but slightly less good version of our knight friend. I don't see where he is. I know I didn't. Ah, there we go. Yeah, the Kolrath Knight costs less mana. The effect is not quite as good, but in a pinch, they both serve pretty much the same purpose, making your creatures unblockable. Of course, the Knight also makes it so that your opponent's creatures can't attack, but there's enough room for both of these cards in this deck. Another powerful include is Yawgmoth, Thran Physician. Protection from well, I'll read the mana cost first. 2 and 2 black for a 2/4 human cleric, legendary creature. Protection from humans. Pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature. Put a -1/-1 counter up to 1 target creature and draw a card. You can pay 2 black, discard a card, and proliferate. And discarding the card, I think that triggers Archfiend of Ifnir. It's whenever you discard a card or cycle a card, right? I should know that. I'm the one who's making the video. Counters, nope. Recursion, removal. Yep, so Yawgmoth does pretty much everything you want it to. You can use them as attack outlet, use them to put a -1/-1 thing on creatures, draw cards, and proliferate, and trigger Archfiend of Ifnir. There's really nothing more that I could add to this card. It does literally everything that I could possibly want a card to do in this deck. let's also add in a Zillowport Cutthroat. Whenever Zillowport Cutthroat or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So there is a payoff for using your -1/-1 counters to kill your own creatures. You get to drain your opponents. And notably, it doesn't say non-token creature. So you can load up those counters on your token creatures, which are probably going to be irrelevant until you reach a certain critical mass, and use them to drain your opponents. In a similar vein, we're going to put in Mirkwood Bats. It is 3 and a black for a 2/3 flying bat. Whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. So, who knows, maybe you'll be able to drain your opponents before you even get the Astronaut's altar out or your Torment of Hellfire. But each of these synergize well with the whole create tokens and use them to sacrifice to kill your opponents. So I feel like they are strong includes in this deck. The next card we'll take a look at is All Will Be One. All Will Be One is 3 and 2 red for an enchantment. Whenever you put 1 or more 1/1 counters on a permanent or a player, All Will Be One deals that much damage to target opponent, creature, an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. This is what I'm saying is the upgraded version of Lasting Tarfire. Yes, it is much cheaper, but this does damage equal to the number of counters you're putting on. So I feel like this is a stronger version of Lasting Tarfire, and it can be triggered during your opponent's turns as well, since it says whenever you do it. So you're not really losing anything. Yeah, it's $15, and it costs, like I said, 3 more mana. But I feel like this is a better option, especially if you're able to put more than one counter. Well, if you're able to put 3 or more counters out per turn, which obviously isn't going to happen, every time. But I could see the argument for taking the guaranteed too, because maybe it's easier to put 1 counter on an opponent's creature every turn. On the other hand, if you have something that gives your creatures wither, just blocking could put more than 2 1/1 counters on opponent's creatures. So I think it really depends on your board state and how you build the deck. There are reasons to take Lasting Tarfire, not least of which is I don't want to spend $15. But I feel like this has a higher ceiling than Lasting Tarfire does. I like having some counter spells in my deck, or in this case, some counterspell protection. Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast, as far as I can tell, they both do the exact same thing, which is 1 red, choose 1 counter target spell if it's blue, or destroy target permanent if it's blue. So this is the obvious. Your opponent's trying to counterspell your commander or whatever. And oh, most people don't expect a red elemental blast or a pyroblast. So having a little bit of protection from counter spells can be nice. Another removal spell that I would usually include in my decks is Feed the Swarm. 1 in a black, destroy target creature or an enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. This is great for blowing up Smothering Tithe or Rhystic Study or any dangerous creature. Of course, you're going to lose some life, but it's usually worth it. A decent trade-off. As they say, the only life that matters is the last one, so just don't kill yourself with this and you'll be fine. Dark Ritual is a card that I think needs no introduction. I put it in pretty much every black deck that I can, but just in case you don't know what it does, 1 black mana, you add 3 black mana to your mana pool. And here are 2 cards that I put in pretty much every green deck. Birds of Paradise, 1 green, 0/1 flyer, tap to add 1 mana of any color. And the Delighted Halfling. 1 green for a 1/2 halfling citizen. Tap it to add 1 colorless or add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. There are quite a few legendary cards in this deck, and I'm sure people will try to counter your commander once they realize what kind of carnage she can cause. So even if you just cast this to cast Auntie and make her uncountable, it's worth the include in my opinion. If you want to draw cards and you're in black, I don't really think that you can go without putting Necropotence in the deck. 3 black mana for an enchantment. Skip your draw step. Whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. Pay 1 life. Exile the top card of your library face down. Put that card into your hand at the beginning of your end step. Now, the only downside of this card is exiling the card from your graveyard, but there isn't a ton of recursion in the deck. I don't think it'll hurt too much. But the ability to pay 1 life per card and just draw as many cards as you want to seems pretty decent. Which is probably a massive understatement. While I was searching cards for this deck on Scrivehall, I came across a card that has quickly become one of my pet cards. There are probably better options for this deck, but I want to put this card in there simply because I want to play it. It's called Misfortune. It's 1 enchant for a sorcery. Target opponent chooses 1. You put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control and gain 4 life. Or you put a -1/-1 counter on each creature that opponent controls, and Misfortune deals 4 damage to him or her. So you're either going to buff all of your creatures and gain a little bit of life, or if your commander's out, drain them of a bunch of life, and then deal 4 damage to them. So I think that the obvious choice will pretty much always be the first option. But I do want to play with this card just to see what people choose and, you know, what kind of situations I can force my opponents into. That is my one pet card for the deck. Hypatra's Mark is 1 green for an instant. Target creature you control gains hexproof until the end of the turn. Remove all -1/-1 counters from it. So, not only are you making your creature hexproof, you get to make it a little bit stronger if it has 1/1 counters, -1/-1 counters. I feel like this card has pretty good synergy with the deck. It's very cheap at 11 cents. It's a nice little protection piece, kind of like a Tamiya safekeeping. Speaking of protection pieces, Heroic Intervention, once again, it's just another staple card. It goes in pretty much any deck that has green in it that I build. It's 1 and a green mana for an instant. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until the end of the turn. Great board-wide protection. And it's going in the deck because it's, like I said, it's an obvious include. When I was looking at the new cards that were revealed today, there was a card that I saw called Dawnhand Dissident. 1 black for a 1/2 elf warlock. Blight 1, which means put a 1/1 -1/-1 counter on a creature you control. Surveil 1, Blight 2, exile target card from a graveyard. Also, it says during your turn, you may cast creature spells from among cards you own exiled with this creature by moving 3 counters from among creatures you control, in addition to paying their other costs. So, this blights your stuff, which lets you draw cards from your commander. It also removes counters from creatures you control, and it recurs things. So this is something that I would definitely look to put in the deck. Obviously, it's not released yet. I think it's a rare. Let me see if I can view the details. Yeah, it is a rare. But I'm assuming it probably isn't going to be very expensive. I do love the artwork, but that's beside the point. I think this is a card that will fit nicely into the deck, since it lets you blight your own things. It lets you surveil, which is nice, and it lets you cast cards from exile. So this is something that I would try to slot into the deck. I don't know what the price is going to be yet, but I have a feeling that it would do well with this particular precon. At this point, I've removed so many cards, I can't even really call it a precon anymore, but I digress. Another creature that I would add is called, well, I have to undo whatever I just did, called Merciless Javelineer. 2 black and a red, 4/2 Minotaur Warrior. Pay 2, discard a card, put a -1 counter on a target creature. That creature can't block this turn. So this is a discard outlet for the Archfiend of Ifnir. It also puts a -1 counter on something, and it makes it so a creature can't block. I can't think of a reason I wouldn't include this. It's only a 10-cent card. Everything about this card uh, works on paper for this deck. We took out some mana rocks, so let's put one back in. Let's actually remember the right one. Mox Amber. Everyone knows this card. It is kind of, pardon me. It's kind of on the expensive side, but it's a 0 cost mana rock, legendary artifact. Tap it to add 1 mana among 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures and planeswalkers you control. Admittedly, it doesn't do anything until you have a legendary creature on the battlefield, but there are quite a few legendary creatures in this deck, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Obelisk Spider is another one that I would add to the deck. 1 a green and a black for a 1/4 spider with reach. When Obelisk Spider deals combat damage to a creature, put a -1/-1 counter on that creature. Whenever you put 1 or more -1/-1 counters on a creature, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is essentially going to double up the drain effect from your commander. Now, how many creatures are in the deck? I usually aim for about 25 to 30 creatures in a deck, so we are exactly at 25. Let's put in some tutors. A demonic tutor is a 1 and a black sorcery. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. We'll also do a worldly tutor. Which is 1 green. Instant, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, shuffle, put it on top. And lastly, I have to spell correctly and put my hands on the keyboard in the correct place. Innkeeper's Talent. This seems like a weird include. Maybe. But I actually think it does a lot for this deck. It's 1 and a green for an enchantment class. The first level, at the beginning of your beginning of combat on your phase, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control. This is the least impactful. You can kind of use this to mitigate some of the -1/-1 counters you're putting on your creatures, but this is really not the reason why I am putting this card in the deck. Levels 2 and 3 are. Level 2 is 1 green mana to unlock. Permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1. Notably, it's any kind of counter and ward stack, so if you put a -1 counter on your commander while this is on the battlefield, it'll be ward 1 and ward blight 2. So this is a pretty decent effect since a lot of your creatures are going to have -1/-1 counters on them. Well, guess what? Now they have ward. Level 3 is 3 and a green to unlock. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player. So this will double the +1/+1 effect of the level 1 part of this enchantment, but more importantly, it's going to double up the -1/-1 counters that you're putting on your opponent's creatures. It will unfortunately also double up the counters you put on your own creatures. But the trade-off is your opponent's creatures will be dying faster. And in theory, if they die faster, and you have say the blowfly infestation out, well, they're dying faster, so you can put out more 1/1 counters, and those will also be doubled. So it's kind of a snowball effect. Uh, if this works the way that I want it to, it'll kind of snowball and lead to your opponents dying faster. All right, so at this point, this video has been going on for God knows how long now. I'm going to say that the video is over, and if you want to stop watching now, be my guest. Then again, you probably stopped watching a long time ago. The point is, I'm going to do all the, hey, thanks for watching. Feel free to leave a comment if you could think of something I could be doing better, or if you want to suggest your own cards. Feel free to like the video and subscribe and all that. With all that out of the way, if you want to keep watching, I'm going to completely redo this land situation, our mana base. It kind of sucks. Before I do that, I'm just going to remove 3 cards because I'm going to go down to 36 cards. And I think that'll be more than enough lands. When we started, we were at 3.67. That was the average mana value. We've shaved off about 1 mana's worth of average mana value. One of the things that I will do now that I have these extra 3 cards to play with is put in a few bonus cards. Damio Safekeeping, probably Abrupt Decay. And just make sure I have a decent amount of draw. We'll put in the Guardian Project. So we went to about 2.75 for our mana value. I'm going to select all of these. And I'm going to keep that and the command tower. And I'm just going to get rid of everything else. Let's go back and put in 1 of each. Let's put it in Ancient Tomb. Triome. Notably, it also has cycling. So if for some reason we really just don't want this, we can cycle it. I will probably be putting in every land that has cycle that I can fit in here. Even though they usually come into play tapped. One of the things I need to do is go on Scryfall and look at cycle lands. Let's put in a Baron Moor. It has cycling. Some of these lands might have been in there already. Yeah, I think it was. I'll skip the deserts. Festering Thicket. I could probably get away with less than 36 lands, but I just hate being mana screwed. Polluted Mire. What? That never happened. I didn't do that. We'll cut that out. Sheltered Thicket. I think that's probably enough. We'll put in this Twisted Landscape. We'll put in a City of Brass. And a Mana Confluence. Let's also put in, I forgot what the proper name for them is, but the lands that come in untapped if you have more than one opponent. Something like that. What are they? Luxury Suite was one. Spire Garden. What was the third one? Like Undergrowth Stadium, I think. There's what's the name of the land that I'm thinking of? It's tap for one colorless or pay one, tap it, put a -1/-1 counter on something. Grasping Dunes. We'll go over the deck, the mana base in a second. We also got Cabal Coffers. Urborg. So we're at 23 lands. What else could we put in here? Some fetch lands. We'll do that last, probably. Exotic Orchard. I was tempted to say Reliquary Tower, but that goes against the whole discard thing for Archfiend of Ithnir, so we definitely don't want that. We want Shocklands. Blood Crypt. Stomping Ground. So we're at 27. Bajuka Bog. Let's put in this Verdant Catacombs. Bloodstained Mire. Wooded Foothills. All right, let's look at our color distribution. Pretty even. Let's see. Now, this is like the big money cards. Absolutely do not feel like these need to go into the deck for it to work. Tega, Badlands. And I'm missing one. A Bayou, that's what it is. And then from there, maybe we've got what, 34? We can put in like 2 more swamps since this is a very black heavy deck. This is a big black deck if I ever saw one. I think that should do it. I've spent the past several hours talking about this deck, what I would do, how I think it should function, what cards to put in, what cards to take out. I tried to be as thorough as I could. Like I said previously, if anyone has any suggestions for what I could be doing better, or even what cards you would put in the deck or take out, feel free to let me know in the comments. I appreciate anyone that watched this long. Have a good one, and if this video does well, I'll see you in the next one.